Hey guys, I'm here with David Liu, our Australian national champion. Um, Congratulations, first of all, David. You didn't end my run beating me in top four to make it to finals. But congratulations, and yeah, let's just go straight into your deck profile. Yeah, anything you want to say before we get started?
No, thanks for having me. It was an incredible 2 days. Honestly, I think I was saying this on the interview stream that I almost didn't make it. I actually got back from the US on the 26th. So a lot of luck that they even let me in the country. So I'm just really fortunate to have even played in the event. So the win was absolutely just surreal at this stage. But yeah, it was a great run. You were my semi-final opponent, super close as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such a great day. So nothing. Just still just stoked and processing it right now.
Yeah. All right, let's get right into it. So your leader, you've got Son Goku and Vegeta slash Gogeta Xeno leader. Yeah. Why'd you choose this spicy boy, the leader?
I've been a religious black player, so prior to this, I was always playing Vegex. As some of the viewers will probably know, I played that very religiously throughout many tourneys. It did me quite good. Obviously, that leader has been hit again and again and again to the point where now it actually can't really be played. So I think I was looking for other leaders that had a similar kind of flavor after play testing a bunch, realizing that Gogeta Xeno although it had a slightly slower start to Vegex, but had a far more aggressive mid range. So given sort of where the meta was at, with a lot of mid range type decks that were coming out, it seemed to be the best choice, and I'm glad I picked it. So I guess very quickly about the leader. On the front side, once per turn, whenever Union Fusion, you draw one, and auto, you can just mill five into Warp. So that's sort of a similar take to what Vegex does, except it goes to Warp. So that's your fuel for your plays, and then you can on attack draw one and take a life, which is great. So it's got self awakening capacities, which I think is always a big choice, a big part for me when I decide which leader I play. Any kind of self awakener is always welcome, so you don't get denied. And then the awaken is untap one, draw one. On the backside, it's got the same auto as the front. Whenever you Union Fusion, you draw one, and on attack you draw one, and you can mill up to five. So unlike the other one, it's an on attack auto. And then the last skill, which a lot of people forget, which actually came super clutch this tournament rather, is the ability to take one life and give two of your one drops 10k power each. So total of 20k. Uh, it is commonly overlooked and deceptively powerful, and actually won me a couple of games where it got really tight, especially my third round grand final game as well, where this last skill really pushed gave me the oomph to push through. So that's the leader. I think it's very powerful. There is some RNG with all the mills, but as I'll go through the deck, there are ways to play around that a little bit. So that's the leader. Onto the main deck. The first, I mean, we'll start with the Goku and Vegetas. So I play the
Fusion pieces.
three, yeah, the three catastrophic premonition. What it does, it's unique, double strike, once per turn. Opponent adds a card to their hand using non-leader skill, gets 10k. So if your opponent super combos, this card just gets 10k. So it discourages super combos. The four true fighting spirits, which is very self-explanatory. Deflect, add one card, so it's a self-awakener, but the second skill is what we all sort of focus on. If your opponent activates a counter, they warp one. So pretty self-explanatory, just fuel for your
Insane card. That
insane card. Quite snapped still, still just very strong. Uh, Regardless, and in this deck, it's even more relevant. And then for the Vegetas, the four Vegeta True Fightings, this one is when you untap an energy. Your opponent untaps energy, they warp one. Very relevant against blue, and also Golden Freezer as well. So absolutely must play this at four. I didn't run the Vegeta Catastrophic. I think the trigger condition is a little bit different to the Goku's, so it was less relevant. And fortunately for us, we have the super combo to round out the rest of the 5Ks. So I played a 7-8 split. Um, Before I sort of jump further, I mean, shout out to Dylan Warren and his list. A lot of this list was inspired by him, so I have to give credit where that's due. So he, inspired the 7-8 build. So these are my little pieces. which I used for the deck. Pretty self-explanatory, and if you play anything less than that, then you're really playing with fire. So
For
that's
sure.
the Goku Vegeta package. Next, the four thwartings, very self-explanatory. Probably one of the strongest black cards, if not the strongest black card in the game right now.
It's probably just the
Sadly,
strongest card for cost of 1.
for a cost of 1, it is the strongest card. It's Union Fusion from Warp for 1 black. So that's where the leader skill comes into play. So you warp 5, so your pieces come from warp, 1 energy, 25k on attack, warp anything, and it's 25k double strike. So it's incredible value by itself. In this deck, it really shines. Going back to the leader, whenever you Union Fusion, you draw a card. So it effectively refunds itself in this deck, which makes it even more insane. Previously, black decks would have to overrun the Goku Vegeta pieces before you could play that. In this deck, you get your pieces into warp as part of the leader effects. So this is very efficient to play. To play anything less than 4 would be silly. So this is the card you need to keep control of your opponent's board. There's nothing that does it better. So you must see this. Otherwise, a lot of the control that this deck has and pressure this deck has just falls out the window. Next is Fearless Fusion at 4 as well. It's the same, just 1 energy. It's a blocker. Same activation conditions, just the 2 from Warp as well. And then this one says when it's played, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, energy cost 4 or less, ignoring barrier, and then warp it. So very relevant against things like Lord Slug, the 3-drop Lord Slug, the Drum for KP, and even Poutine, where you do...
Yep.
Poutine will still tap this down, but very relevant to clear out some of the barrier, floodgatey type cards, which can be quite nasty to deal with. A lot of black cannot deal with barrier well, so having this card is a bit of a godsend. Most black cards, except for the SS3 Vegeta, 2 energy black Overrun can deal with barrier. Nothing else can really deal with it. So this is great.
Yeah.
Must play 4 on the blocker. 16k blocker comes in clutch.
Yeah. So hard to kill.
Very hard to kill.
Yeah.
So those 2, and then finally, probably the MVP for me, SS3 Gogeta, Marvelous Might. So again, same activation conditions. This guy has a 20k barrier, except he's got an activate main where you can bottom deck this guy to pull a 1 Goku Xeno and Vegeta Xeno from either drop or warp. Now, I only play this at 3 because if you go first, he can only be played on turn 3 because your opponent has his 2 energy before he comes out. So he can be a little bit slow, but when you have the energy for this guy, this card is nuts. And what I mean by that is when you combine this with the leader and the Unison, it is just absolutely insane amount of pressure it drops. So normally when you play this, you swing with this. It's a 20k barrier, which already is very, very strong. And then from there, it goes into, you can bottom deck this. It goes into either of these Gokus and this Vegeta, which under the leader skills, you can essentially pump them to 25 base each. And that's before you either take life with the Self-Awakener skill or you get the 10k. So absolutely incredible. Really came clutch for me the whole day. But I wouldn't change more than 3. You only really see 1, sometimes 2 per game. But what holds us back is the fact that the opponent needs 2 energy. So I would only keep this going second because I can play it on turn 2. Otherwise, I would mull it away if I was going first. So that's the Union package. Don't think I would change this. I think this is the ideal ratio.
Yep. I most definitely would agree. It's very, very consistent. If you see thwarting on 1, you're in such a good spot.
Absolutely. You should hard mill for thwarting generally, or at least 1 or 2 of your unions. So I think very helpful. And then the 4 trunks, this is very self-explanatory. It's Overrun 3, free Overrun 3, pretty standard. The most important thing is that when it's sent to your warp from your battle area or your deck, add it to your hand. So with your leader, this is super synergistic because when you hit it to mill, when you mill it into warp, it just comes to hand. So super easy. And then usually you always want to overrun this guy when you can, because when you use the first Union Fusion, you'll have ideally 2 In drop, typically you'll combo off a one card, usually a Kai, and you overwhelm. You get the pieces back into the warp, you get another 15k body, and then it comes back to your hand. So it's just a lot of value. And ultimately, you always want to be putting cards back into your warp as fuels. So over the course of the game, you should always be seeing at least one. You should always have one in your hand as a cheap overwhelm. So no reason to run less than 4 of this. It's your mini overwhelm, which you just need to keep the fuel going. So that's 4. The other bigger overwhelms, 1 secret identity to clear the sort of bigger boards. Good against Icarus, where you have, sometimes you've got the token blocker, you've got a few of the smaller ones, like Riposte. You get a lot of value because you can get the Riposte, the Goku as well, the blocker Goku. So this is just value. I only play 1 in main, 1 in sideboard. I think this card's been around for a while. It's just super strong. Another clutch card, Bardock the Tenacious. This deck, as I said earlier, a bit of a glass cannon. It doesn't really have the same floodgates. Black doesn't really have good floodgates, so this Nimbus-like effect actually saves you a lot.
It's really, really
when
good.
Yeah, absolutely. It really saves you when you have a potentially rough turn coming up. Usually how I like to play this deck is always to stay on the 4 life. At 4 life, life is a resource, as in you get power from taking life, such as the leader skill, your self-awakeners. So it's imperative that you stay at least 3 life, 4 ideally, but 3 is okay. And this guy just keeps you alive. Combining this with the Fearless Fusion, you can essentially triage the amount of attacks that come your way. Your opponent only gets effectively 3 attacks, maybe 4 depending on the unison. So it really helps to just stay alive. And then I'll also run through some of the negates I play as well that complement this nicely. So 2 of these overperformed. Finally, Beyond the Limits, they're just a utility card to pull back whatever you need from Warp. Everything is 6-drop or 7-drop between 3 and 7. So you can either grab Thwarting back, you can grab Marvelous Might back, or just a good card. Didn't see it as much, but Overrun 6 30k body is always just good to have. So it's just you always get the 1 damage of that. No one is comboing out typically. So that's the sort of the more expensive overwhelms, typically coming out on turn 3, turn 4.
Yeah, one thing I remember when Gogeta Xeno first came out, and I was starting to mess around with it, people were like running a lot of high cost overwhelms, but in the deck, most time you have like 3 cards in your warp, and then you just put them back so you can fuel your Union Fusion. So it's like those big overwhelms, you don't get to use them anywhere near as much as you used to. Especially coming as a Vegex player.
Absolutely. So the drop is precious. As the game goes on, as you start comboing cards, or even when you awaken, you can use the Union Fusion on both sides. So I typically find myself going into the 6 1-eye Union Fusion because I'll have at least 4 pieces from Union Fusion on both sides, and odds are I'll have comboed 1 or 2 cards, or even comboed them on the defense. So I'll have the 6. So this is just drop zone management, which I think coming from Vegex you kind of have a sense for. So I think for me that came quite naturally. I'd always keep track of how much is in drop. I make sure that I have 6 or 7. Try not to go to 5 because it feels bad to combo wastelessly.
Yeah.
And then this is the one card you always want to try combo off. The Kai essentially says it's in warp. You just bottom deck it to play Unison from warp or hand. So this is relevant when you've got your Unison. So I chose, and this is where there is a bit of flexibility. There's usually 3 choices for Unison, all of which can be pulled out from Kai. You have the PyCon, you have the Black Smoke Dragon, and you have the Mirror. So I'll talk about the PyCon first, and I'll quickly talk about the other 2 choices, which I didn't play. PyCon says permanent, can't attack to a marker, so it needs at least 3 to attack. The +1 is to give 2 1-drop black battle cards, 10k until your next turn. So your little 1-drops can be 15 on your opponent's turn, which is great. And the -3 is play 1 black battle card with an energy cost of 6 and the Union Fusion skill from your drop area or warp. So again, the Gogeta pieces all fulfill that condition. So I chose this because I think it was a little bit more aggressive. The other 2 choices, Black Smoke Dragon essentially draws you an extra card per turn. Warps 1 from your opponent's drop, which is quite relevant against KP. And Icarus, you can always warp the higher dragon. So I think in Dylan's list, he ran the 3 Smoke Dragon, which I think was a very good meta choice. And then I think there's another list that came top 16, Nicholas Menard, that ran the mirror. The mirror's +1 is to put one card from hand to warp and draw on. So it fixes your warp. I didn't play mirror because I think that you'd want a Unison that's a little bit more aggressive, that does a bit more than just filtering. So I think PyCon was already superior to mirror, in my opinion. The way I played this is that I would often hold the Goku True Fighting Spirit in my hand. And against decks like King Piccolo and especially Icarus, you want your opponent to pay taxes on their counter, which they do a lot of. So keeping the True Fighting Spirit in hand is actually not a bad thing. And you also have, only 7 Gokus, as I said earlier. So it's more likely that a Vegeta is going to get hit into the warp. So with that in mind, the way I played the deck was to always try and have the Goku in hand because it just was relevant in the meta. If I saw the Goku in warp, awesome. If I didn't, I would just drop it from hand. It's one card and you get the resource back, so it's not that bad of a neg. I think moving forward, I think we've discussed this separately as well, Max. Yeah. I might play some Smoke Dragons because that's the only way you can keep up the grind against decks like Icarus that essentially draw 2 and get all these freebies.
Yeah.
So the Smoke Dragon helps you keep tempo. It helps you remove their high dragons. So sort of a 2-in-1. So I'd have to do a bit more playtesting to see whether I want to keep this ratio as 4 or not. When I sided, I'd always side one of these out, but I still typically saw it enough. A cool thing you can do with this guy is, and why I liked him so much was, you can always put this, if there's one in warp and one in hand, you'd play it for 1 marker from your warp, you'd +1 to put your 2 little guys up, and then you'd slide one under, hit 3, and you get another 15k swing. Yep. So might not seem like much, but that kind of little pressure against decks like Icarus that gives you an extra poke still takes another card from their hand, and that also sets you up. Your opponent starts to freak out a little bit because it sets you up for the -3 the following turn, so they're more inclined to swing into the Unison, which is fine because I would rarely use the -3 unless the only time I use -3 is if there's something to clear on the board, so I'll go thwarting, or again the Marvelous Might again just puts in so much value. So I would more often go into this, but only if my opponent let me.
Yeah.
Else, your +1 is just a lot more value, frankly. Plus 10k to 2 cards.
That's 20k combo power.
20k combo. That's 4 cards at least. Yeah. So it's kind of nuts. So that's the Unison package.
Yeah.
One change the amount of cards I play for.
Yeah. One thing I used to do when I was playing Gogeta was if I had my Unison with like 3 markers on it, I'd activate main, get rid of it, play a Gogeta, then Overrun to get PyCon back in the warp, then Kai to get PyCon back out, then +1. So I get both effects in the same turn. It's just the amount of value you get is ridiculous.
It's great, yeah. It's really good. So that I think you have a lot to work with, and it's very flexible. I think most people like this too. It's a good target, especially for a deck that is a glass cannony. Like having this feel like a real threat, and people swinging into that is actually good for you because again, you want to keep the 4 life. Go push turn. The 2 Kais, I think I have another SPR one, but I don't know where it is. Pretty self-explanatory. Just the counter when you've got 3 or more cards. When you or your opponent have 3 or more cards in warp, which you always have, it's a 1 cost negate, and when you play it, basically you can negate the attack and you can warp another card for the turn, and then it comes back with its skills negated. So this can stop up to 3 attacks if you're lucky. Can then negate itself, remove another body, and then combo for 5k. So I played 2 in main board and 1 side. Again, very deck dependent for how many you want to run. You can trim this based on whatever you're up against. But you should play at least 2. It's just such a good negate.
Yep.
No reason to run less. Petrification, it's a very specific card. This card turns off autos and so the cool thing about this card is, unlike Kai, when this resolves, it turns off the auto on pending. That's like one niche that I need to just call out.
Yep.
So a lot of the on attacks don't go off if you choose to use the
this
discard.
card it's insane in the mirror.
It's very strong in the mirror because you can turn off thwarting. They declare thwarting swings, you counter, you discard, and then the on attack warp one doesn't go off. So this is relevant with quite a few cards. Divine Presence. I play this against Red because Red's Goku Divine Presence is a nightmare to deal with. The Dragon Fist in yellow, for those that play it, is also hard. Because you can't interact with Divine Presence with this. You can't send it off because of the permanent during the turn player can't go, so petrification just stops that. I did this against Dylan. It's U7, and it got me so much value. He pumped his go card, and then I just dropped a card, and um his divine presence was just stopped for the whole turn. So really, a good card. Sometimes you need to side it out against Icarus, for instance. I would side this out, probably less relevant. But with some decks that have bombs, which battle card negates can't deal with, this is excellent.
Yeah, sure.
And the auto impending is just a cherry on top. So
Yeah,
that's just
definitely.
a niche ruling piece. Super Kamehameha, just a great card.
Yep.
Stop floodgates, and you can also pull from life. Only condition is that must be at 4 or less life. So I've seen a lot of good players. I think Max yourself as well.
I was very careful to never pass. Like, I always passed turn when you had 5 life, just so I could land or a post.
Yeah, people can play around this, and I think all the good players will be aware of this. So you need to try and control the amount of life. Stopping the riposte and not stopping the riposte is huge. Stopping the margin boo topo with this is also pretty relevant. So
Just stopping
against
topo.
Peter and so the topo S cards, you need to have this to stop it, and also it just works against KP. Overall, just great card.
Yeah, for sure.
Typically always kept it, and then finally one Champa. You need to have one Champa, enough said.
Yep.
It's a snapped card, honestly.
Yep.
And then Xeno, which is the newest SCR, says counterattack. If you have 3 or more energy, you can play this. Opponent contact with battle cards, which is great. It doesn't negate the attack, so the pending attack still goes through, but you can block. So the cool thing about this deck is that with this Gogeta, if this Gogeta's out, you can declare counter with Pan, and then also block, so you can stop the attack as well. So it's something that came quite clutch. Most players will play around this. I think people are getting a better feel for playing around it. If you've watched Dylan Warren's game against Andrew Doval, Doval tapped out as Icarus, and then Dylan actually combat stuff off his board. And the reason why is for Pan, the permanent says for each battle card in play, so either player's area reduces cards cost by 2. So if there's a total of 4 battle cards on board, this card comes out for free, which is insane. It's just 40k beta. And then the last one is a nod to Heron's Lineage. Activate main, remove this card from the game, and then choose one of opponent's cards and gain control of it. So
that's just my favorite thing against a rival deck. So like, I'm going to rival this, and then I go, that card's now mine.
Yeah, and the rival cards always have 1 cost energy, so you'll quickly get it.
Yeah.
Just a great card, and it's free. It's also just you can use it on defense and offense. Against my match against Tyson, I just dropped this and dumped for some insane number.
Yeah.
And put a champion behind it. There's it just does so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, it's ironic that I say this, but Kai is too expensive. The Kai CR is too expensive because it costs 1 energy. Free is always the name of the game.
Yeah. Yep.
That is the main deck. Probably wouldn't make too many changes to it. Main thing's probably the Unison choice, and potentially some of the bigger overruns. But I think that's something we'll have to test a bit more. Now, quickly onto side. I've already been chided for this a lot. Kibito Kai should be Heavenly Demigra. There's no reason why you should play Heavenly Demigra over Kibito Kai. The effects are effectively the same as my bottom Dexter, but Demigra ignores Barrier, which is very relevant against Omega Shenron. Allies absorbed, because when you absorb the Oceanus Barrier, you just need it. So this is for Sin. Sin Shenron is probably the toughest matchup because the 9 blanks everything. If I come against Sin Shenron, you must stick the Gogeta thwarting ASAP, but you don't swing with it, because if you swing with it, that 30k 9 drop is going to come in and wipe it out. So if anything, I would stick it in active mode, and it discourages 9 drop from coming out, because that can only come out on turn 2.
Yeah.
Whereas your thwarting can come out earlier.
Yeah.
So this should really be Heavenly Demigra. To the viewers, don't be like me, be prepared. Get the Demigra, it makes a difference. This card is just snap, Koitsukai, needs no explanation. It just turns off your opponent's mid-battle battle card interactions, whether it be counter plays or negates. Extremely powerful against decks like Icarus, Golden Freezer, KP.
Any red deck, any yellow deck.
Any red deck that are rivals, like Divine Presence, like all this stuff. Kodzukai, you just pay mad taxes on it to just warp 2 for any time something 20k or less comes out. Needs no. This guy's already been talked about enough, so I won't go into too much detail about it.
Nasty card.
The Dabura Ritual at Hand. This is for hand destruction. Cell Surge must always be respected. I came up with Cell Surge once this game, sided for this, and it just made such a difference, especially when you're getting Ribriand, but you're getting your 2 cards back. And a body on the board as well.
Yeah.
Just feels good for you, feels bad for the opponent. So
Sure.
it's ironic that my younger brother brought Cell Surge to the Australian circuit. That he's not playing it with this card. So I'm sorry, Alan, for all this, but a lot of people would main 4 of these, especially in the US circuit, or 2 to 4 of these, depending on sort of how afraid of hand destruction you were. So great card, answers a lot of hand destruction, pain. Another Kai, already explained, just this is sort of just dependent on the deck you play against. The Bardock Fully Unleashed, which is for Sin Shenron, Gogeta, Xeno, Mirror, and if there was like extra deck Broly as well, extra card Broly, just warp Overrun 5s, the old card Overrun 5s, choose all of your opponents' battle cards energy cost of 6 or more than to warp, so it's just good for warping big guys.
Yep.
Needed against Sin. Sin is the main thing, but Gogeta, Xeno, and it's all of his Gogetas all 6 as well, so it is relevant. Another Secret Identity to do the sort of mass board clearance, just good for cleaning up weenies. Probably more relevant against yellow, where you have little higher dragons, little bodies, even just like blocker tokens that you just want to get rid of. This card never came up, but this is my only side against Hachiyak, which would otherwise destroy this deck. I won't go up into this too much because I never played it. I think there was only a very small handful of Hachiyak players, but this is just a late game bomb, I suppose. Cool art. Unfortunately, the utility is not as good. And then the 2 max powers, an extra negate, which is always welcome. But more importantly, the activate main to choose opponent's battle card with energy cost greater than their current energy, and send to warp. Max, you use this against me as well to warp my Gogeta thwarting. I have this against Sin and all the other bigger guys that get cheated out earlier. So it's just good utility. It's also just a negate as well, so it's good to have. Came surprisingly useful against Margin Vegeta as well. So I remember against Peach, it's another negate. So just an overall good utility card. So that rounds off the sideboard. Would I change it? I mean, obviously I would change this. Other than that, would probably keep most of it the same unless something additional major drops. So that is the side main for the deck I played over the weekend.
Yeah, just quickly going into your matchups. So if I'm correct, you did end up going undefeated throughout the entire Nats. You had 1 tie, and that was it?
That was round 1, and that was it was unfortunate on my part. My internet dropped out in the first sort of 10-15 minutes. It was against Dylan Fury, who I think you played against in the top 8. Dylan's a good player, and I won round 1 very convincingly. And round 2 was one of those things where it should have gone into time, and with the time rules, I would have won based on the fact that I won round 1. But the fact was that, look, my internet dropped up. It was on me. And for me to be given a default win based on, I think, something on my side, it would just be unfair to a player like Dylan. So, we finished round 2. I said, look, I think I had a minute on the clock left. Just gave the game to him, and then we called the draw. I think he played U7 Gohan. It's a very linear strategy where you put the Gohan on 1, the Unison on 2, and then Divine Presence on 3. It's pretty telegraphed. It can be quite aggressive as well, depending on some of the orders. He can play things like Goku, like I think it's like Path of Power, the skillless one. A couple of like cool techs which he did. I mean, he blew me out of the water in game 2, which is like super good on him. It is quite Gohan centric. If that Gohan goes, a lot of value goes from that deck because remember the leader gets no value. You have to combo to get the card back. It's got some cool, interesting synergies on the backside with the whole like Spirit Boost Unison. When Unison dies, a skillless comes back. It's an alright leader. It just does not have the resource to grind out against a deck like Icarus. That we should always lose to Icarus, in my opinion.
Yeah, no.
And I think you can probably comment on that
Yeah,
as
that
well.
was,
Being an Icarus player.
yeah,
I think it
no.
was 2-0 for you.
Yeah, 2-0 me for that one. And then, so that was your round 2, because you have round 1 by round 3, you paired.
I played Green Gotenks, which is just a bit of a turtle deck.
Yeah.
Green Gotenks has 4 good cards, and those 4 good cards are Grim Reaper of Justice, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once Grim Reaper goes, deck really doesn't do much, so
Yeah.
you're just more aggressive and you'll grind them out.
Yeah. It's basically that Grim Reaper's basically the exact same card as your thwarting, except yours costs 1, theirs costs 2.
Yeah, and Grim Reaper just gives a lot of value, and it's just insane. It's just a lot of value. It's a very good card in an otherwise like mediocre type deck.
Yeah.
So well, I mean, it's solid, but Green Gotenks is a very type deck.
Yep. And then round 4, you had.
I had Cell Surge in round 4.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Gogeta Xeno is slightly favored against Cell Surge. I think this is where my like 1-drop weenies like blew him out of the water, because remember I always life, and even though my hand was on like 2 or 3 cards left, Gogeta Xeno is one of these cards decks where if you have the right 2 or 3 cards in hand, you can have a very and about 4 cards in life, you can have a very explosive turn.
Sure.
So I think for my opponent, Cell Surge gets no reason on the backside. I mean, I know this deck inside out because I've been my brother's punching bag for this deck because he created the deck in Australia. So we just know it inside out.
Yeah.
And once the 2 shots of Cell are done, like he's pretty much dead. The leader gets no resources on the backside, and if my hand is not at 0, then I will win the game.
Yeah. Basically. And then round 5
was Golden Freezer. Golden Freezer is like a variant of Icarus, in my opinion. The backside is really nasty to I think it's like to sack a Freezer army. All the Freezer armies are like cantrip.
Yes.
You sack the Freezer army.
Untap
you draw 1,
2.
tap 2, which is insane.
Yeah.
The clutch card you must play against this deck is the Vegeta True Fighting Spirit, as I was saying earlier. You side this for I think it's Soul Striker, but it works just as well against Golden Freezer. Golden Freezer can't remove it, especially when you bump it up with PyCon. It's a 15k, so it's pretty. As long as you stick it, it discourages them from switching energy. So switching energy is something that it's obviously super valuable in yellow-based decks. So I stuck the Vegeta very early. I also made sure to get another one out with Marvelous Might. So, if you ever want to untap energy, you'd have to pay 2. So
nice. And then
overall, I won the resources grind. Then Marge Vegeta against Peter Bogda. Honestly, I thought Marge Vegeta had sort of faded into extinction, but Peter definitely showed us otherwise. I think it's just sequencing, resource control. It is kind of telegraphed in how it plays, but you just got to be careful with your life count. This is a 2-1. It was super tight. But especially when you play first, you have cards like Pan, you have cards like Bardock that buy you turns. As soon as you hit turn 3, he does have Topo, but you can play around that. You can still push through. The deck it also uses life as a resource as well. So when you have 2 glass cannon decks fighting each other, going first makes a huge difference. And knowing who can drop the floodgates when is very important. So that was my round.
Sure. And then 6. In your top cut, you had what was it? What did you play? You played Icarus, and then King Piccolo, right?
Icarus, and then KP. The 2 Icarus, I think it was Jake, then yourself.
Yep.
Icarus is typically. I'll talk about this because funnily enough, I didn't come against Icarus in Swiss. I
played 1 Icarus the entire day, and that was Ben in top 4.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow. So I think there are some people who just hit Icarus all the way.
Yeah.
I think Tyson and Pete hit a lot of Icarus, whereas people like us did not.
Yeah.
Icarus is just a lot of value these days. Set 15 gave Icarus a lot of love. And the Turles and the Goku, which is just so good. The Goku is just a blocker. Draws a card, rests another card. Turles blows up to 20k double. So it's just gave the yellow more tools to its already huge toolbox of riposte and all this other good stuff. Against Icarus, the true fighting spirits. Icarus struggles to clear this if this is an active mode, and also if it's a bit bigger. You have to run into it with. You have to power the Super Saiyan to tap it and then run into it with body. If it's 15k, sometimes I'll combo out. But remember, if they're running a body into it, it means they're paying 1 energy for it. So that's not a bad trade-off. It slows down their play.
Yeah.
That's why I kept the True Fighting Spirit because it's such a counter defensive heavy deck. It's so important. But Icarus, I would still think Icarus is the most consistent, probably the strongest deck in the meta. I think it's just super flexible in what it can do.
For sure.
I think the builds can be varied. People play Slug, some people don't. I think many played Slug. You didn't play Slug. A few guys go half and half on that, which it's not for me to come out. I'm not an Icarus player, but I think the key for Gogeta Xeno is that you can't aggro them. You have to grind a mid-game match.
Yeah.
You have to wait until they tap out and then just push aggressively.
Yeah.
You can push through a post. I did that against Jake, where I pushed through a post to clinch game. It's definitely possible, but it's again you've got to be very nuanced and controlled in your plays. Otherwise, you will kill yourself. Because if you don't manage resources, they will out-resource you. And then finally against KP, this deck I was quite intimately familiar with, especially as a Vegex player. I know KP quite well.
Yeah, we've had in Australia. We've had quite a strong KP. We've had like a fair few strong KP players throughout the entire year. So we definitely have.
Yeah. So a lot of practice across the board. KP was a good meta pick because of that Piccolo Unison. It's sort of
Rex
smashing
Icarus.
Counters left, right, center. It's just against Icarus is just so much value.
Yep.
The same strategy applies, and I think I actually made a big mistake in my third round against Tyson. Actually, you always need to clear the unison. It's a very the deck is glued together by the unison. Game one, I know I could blitz him on game one because he hadn't sided yet. If you watch the stream, it was just incredibly one-sided. There was a simple game plan: clear the unison, and it's like bash face. Yep. There was like just no chance. Game two, he sided very well. This deck is terrified of good side decks. Meki Kabura just shuts the deck down, and the Vegeta Unison is the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
So very good game two. And then game three, I think there were some misplays on both sides. My biggest misplay was not swinging to Unison and letting him drop the Kai. So that was just silly on my part. Swinging dual double strike in Unison, clearing it from 4 to 2, then leader swings, goes on to 1, and then just finishing it off. Should have done that, but didn't do that. Just a super clutch game in the end. I think really came down to the wire, but also just showcased how aggressive Gogeta Xeno can be. I had 3 cards, Tyson had 9, I think. Board set was roughly the same, but the amount of gas you can push out from the little 1-drops. I think I had the Marvelous Might, and Overrun in my hand to start the turn, and then the amount of I think 4 or 5 energy, and the amount of value you can get from that is just insane. So
yeah, for sure.
Definitely came from behind. I think I also got very lucky, candidly, pulling that thwarting out of life, and then just pushing for game there. Super tight. Again, Tyson definitely a great player. Also, obviously, it sucks to come so close and not make it, but couldn't have asked for a more impressive grand final opponent. So yeah, that was the run. A bit of a crazy run.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Quite stoked.
Congratulations, David. We'll wrap it off there. We'll let you go back to sleep because we both know you're very jet lagged. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. See ya.
All right. Thanks for having me, Max. Cheers.